I'm going to do a quick introduction for Svens Telemaque. Svens Telemaque is a transformative author, speaker, and social entrepreneur dedicated to empowering youth and reforming the prison system. His journey of overcoming adversity has shaped his mission. At Union United Church, he leads a pioneering initiative that involves Black men in prison participating in community roles and trauma-informed personal development courses. His workshops have a global impact, reaching schools, prisons, and various institutions. Svens also serves as a mentor, guiding cohorts of Black boys through the WIBCA's, that's the West Island Black Community Association Maasai Mentoring Group. This program equips them with essential life skills and inspires stories of resilience. His commitment to this cause is evident in his extensive travels across the US, Canada, the Caribbean, and Africa, where he provides thousands with the tools to overcome challenges. His riveting story does not idolize a troublesome past, but reminds us that even broken crayons can still color. Broken crayons still color. So we're so grateful to have Svens Telemaque with us today, and he's leading our first cultural awareness seminar for clinicians of the fall 2025 semester. So Svens, I turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Jarvis, and for the whole team. Good afternoon to all of you. Hope everyone is doing well. Just to go around the table real quick before we have our first icebreaker, if everyone could get off mute for a quick sec and talk about their expectations for our session today. So I'll go ahead and pick on somebody. I'm going to pick on Hanifa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hanifa. I'm a master's student working with Dr. Jarvis, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the talk. Yeah, learning more about the talk. Yeah.
All right. Anything specific though?
Um, I think I found the aspect that you. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found the part about engaging people from prisons really interesting. I think that's a pretty important aspect and kind of allows people to learn more about that. I haven't really known much enough, don't know enough about that, so I thought that would be interesting.
All right. Let's go to Brother Guido. Any expectations you have for today? I love the scenery in the back there. You're breathing well, eh? Oh, that mute button.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah. Go ahead.
hear?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. And for me, it's more or less the same as Hanifa, like the prison populations. It's something that I'm not really used to engaging with. So yeah, I have some expectations about that, and the whole like Black community. I think it's really important to. Well, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Spanish resident in psychiatry who's coming to do an observership here. So we have a lot of Black population back there. So yeah, in general, like the whole talk, I think it's going to be interesting in that way to know how to engage to these populations, both prison and Black communities.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Anybody else would like to say if they had any different expectations, things like that?
Hello, my name is Dries. Nice to meet you all. I'm glad to be here. I just had the link. I'm a PGY5 in psychiatry with Dr. Baki doing an internship right now. I'm gonna do a conference. I don't remember the date, but I think in December too. So stay tuned. But I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. The mental health in the Black community is a subject that touches me really much. I love to hear about it. I love to get more knowledge about it because it's my community too. So looking forward for the conferences for this conference. Yeah.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And we'll get right into it. So I'm going to start off very, very slow. As Dr. Jarvis mentioned, I do a lot of things when it comes to incarceration, the Black community as well. But I want to start off with a very, very simple way. If you have paper and pen that's available, I'd like you to just grab some paper and pen, and we're going to start with the very first exercise. So this is what I want you to do first before we begin. I want you to think about your deepest, darkest secret. And I want you to take that in mind real quick. Don't get scared. Don't get scared. But I want you to think about your deep, dark secret that you don't want anyone to know about. And as you're thinking about that deep, dark secret, I see Silka is a bit worried. She's getting a little red. Don't worry. I'm not going to ask you to share the secret. I want you to write down 3 characteristics that someone would have to have for you to share that secret. What are 3 characteristics that someone would have to have for you to share the secret that you have? If you could write that down, I'll give you a minute to do so. All right. And if you can write them in the chat. What are those characteristics that someone would have to have in order for you to be able to share? All right, so far we have trustworthy, caring, loving, non-judgmental, all of these aspects here. For anyone that is going to be working with any community, I want you to put in mind, these are the characteristics that we need to have whenever we're giving care. This is the reason why I asked you to think about your deep, dark secret and to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Too often when it comes to receiving care from certain institutions, we don't feel empathy, we don't feel a sense of non-judgment, we don't feel a sense of that the people that are trying to care for us care. So people remain closed off and they don't necessarily want to collaborate. So I want to start off this presentation on the very first acts because a lot of people are not aware of some of the challenges that the Black community has faced, still face here in Quebec, and why sometimes providing care for people in the Black community sometimes can be problematic in the sense that some people may have a lack of distrust. Some people may feel like they're not heard, they're not seen. I want to touch on that first, and then we're going to go into cultural awareness and things like that. So first things first, when it comes to the prison system, has anybody here worked in the prison system at all? No? Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna, all right, so Dr. Jarvis, so I'm gonna start off with this presentation. I'm gonna go ahead and share. One moment. So first things first, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So when it comes to Black inmates in Quebec, I'm talking about on the federal side. Black inmates represent 9.2% of the federal carceral population. However, we represent 5.1% of the population in Quebec. This is according to the 2021 census. When we look into the prison system, something else that's also very interesting is the fact that if we look at Canada as a whole, the Black population represents 4.3% all across Canada. But when it comes to the prison system as a whole, we represent about 10%. A lot of people will look at those numbers and they'll feel like, you know what, this means that Black people are more violent. They may look at Black people are more engaged when it comes to criminal activity, which could be farther from the truth. According to the statistics with Globe and Mail, which was done in 2022, we realized that it was 20 to 24% more difficult for specifically Black males to get parole so they could actually get released from prison when they're compared to their white counterparts. That's another pressing issue that we have. So I want to take you back a bit. I don't want to go too far, but I want to go far enough so we can understand some of the challenges of the Black community. So first and foremost, I want to start off with, hold on 1 second. I want to take you back to the 1920s and 1930s. By show of hands here, how many people here are aware that slavery took place in Montreal? All right, we got one hand up, we got a couple hands up. How many people here know that Montreal was a very important dock for creating slave ships? That a lot of slave ships were created here. And that there was a lot of people that were enslaved that actually fled from Canada to go to the United States. We always hear about the contrary of people from the United States coming to Canada, but there were actually a lot of enslaved people that left Canada to go to the northern states in the US that were actually free. I want to take you to the 1920s, 1930s, and talk to you about the domestic scheme. Have you guys heard of the domestic scheme? So first and foremost, in the community of Little Burgundy, which is the very first Black community that we have here in Montreal, we had a group of women coming from the United States, Nova Scotia, the Caribbean. All of these women, they came together and they created a group called the Colored Women's Club. Because there were not sufficient services in the community, they pulled their resources together to serve the community as a whole. One of the issues that the community had is during the domestic scheme. What was that? In the 1920s, 30s, Canada came up with this racist program that would allow people from the Caribbean to come to Canada only under the pretext of becoming a domestic. So that meant if you were a nurse, if you had any other profession, they did not care. You would sign up for this program, learn to be pretty much a maid, and come to Canada. The very first group of domestics came from Barbados. I actually spoke to one of the daughters of the very first domestics. When they arrived to Canada in the winter, they didn't even receive jackets. They were given newspaper to stuff in their clothes as they left the plane on the tarmac. These women were subjected to a lot of discrimination, a lot of disrespect. They were stuck to be working in people's homes, all because they wanted to have an opportunity to have their family members travel over to Canada and Quebec. Their husbands, when it came to work, they could not find work. During that time, the only work that they were able to find was to be able to work on the trains. While they were working on the trains, they had a position which was called a porter. A porter was basically a man that worked the train, whether he was cleaning, helping with baggage. These men were subject to a lot of different forms of racism. However, these men were never called by their first name. They weren't called Dries, they weren't called Lynn, they weren't called Guido or Hanifa. They were called George. Everyone had the exact same name, George. These men came together and they started a union. By a show of hands, how many people here have heard of Reverend Charles Est? All right. How many people here have heard of Dr. King? Martin Luther King, right? We've all heard of Dr. King. For everyone that is in some kind of medical practice, this gentleman on your screen is someone you need to do research on. He was the minister for 45 years at Union United Church. And this is one of the very first places that I want to touch on when it comes to systemic racism here in Quebec. In the 1920s, 30s, you could not go to the hospital and apply for a job. Reverend Est created something which was called the Black Cross Nurses, alongside the UNIA, which is the Universal Negro Improvement Association. It's an association that still exists to this day. So long story short, because people could not get care, he created his own movement alongside the UNIA so the Black community could actually receive care from nurses that came from all over the Caribbean but could not be recognized here in Quebec. In the 1930s, you have 3 principal hospitals that existed in Montreal. Reverend Est was the advocate for the Black community to fight those hospitals until women were allowed to be nurses in the hospital. So this is a historical fact that history books do not talk about, but the Reverend of Union United Church was one of the very first people to fight against systemic racism here in Quebec when it comes to medical care. So for anyone here that's not familiar with the UNIA, how many people here are familiar with Malcolm X? Right? Some of you have heard of Malcolm X. A lot of people don't know that Malcolm X's parents actually met in Montreal. They met in Montreal because of the UNIA, which was a movement by Marcus Garvey, who was a Pan-Africanist that really believed in improving the situation for Black people across the globe. So this is one of the many contributions that we have. How many people here are familiar with the image that is on their screen by show of hands? How many people here are familiar with this image? They know what this is. All right, we got one person here. Everyone else not too sure?
I think so.
All right. Okay, someone said Concordia. How many people here are aware of the Sir George Williams affair? Okay, I got one person, and that's about it. All right, perfect. So this is exactly why I'm going into these things, because too often a lot of people kind of have this tendency to think that racism is alive and well in the United States, but in Canada, it's not that bad. So we go to the 1960s. In the 1960s, Dr. King is assassinated. Quebec has this very well documented in the newspapers that I've looked over. But the image that you're looking at right now is actually, to this date, the most expensive and the largest student protest in Canadian history. We don't really talk about it in history books. This is another apex where culture, where society, and where services that we receive either from an institution like a university or the government comes hand to hand with racism and different issues that we have. So I don't want you to just take my word for it. I'm going to actually share this with you in another way so you can actually see what I'm talking about. But just to give you some context, late 1960s, what happens is you have a group of Black students that are going to Concordia University. While they're attending Concordia University, the Black students realize that they keep failing their class. So what they decide to do is connect with their white counterparts because they were all on the same page. The white students and the Black students come together and they want to test this theory. So what they end up doing is they all have the same answers to the test. When they get the test, they realize all the Black students fail. So what they did is they decided to approach the dean. After approaching the dean, they realized that they didn't get much help. So they decided to have a sit-in, which basically means on the 9th floor at Concordia University, back then it was called Sir George Williams, they occupied that space and they said they would not move until they received help and support for their cause. They just wanted their grades to change and they wanted that professor to be met with some form of justice. Concordia University responded by turning off the heat. This is 1968, 1969. February. So the kids are freezing. The police decide to disband when the police come on site. I want to give you an example. The majority of you find yourselves in the room, right? I'm not mistaken, right? If you are in a room and you are protesting against, some illegal practices in school, would it make sense for us to create a fire where we're having a sit-in? Would that make sense to you? All right, so don't take my word for it. This is part of a big documentary that I'm going to go ahead and show you here. I do want to give you a quick trigger warning. There is the N word that is used. So if you really feel sensitive to that, you might want to step away. And here we go.
Are you prepared to stand up for your rights? Are you prepared to stand for your rights?
So everybody, let's get upstairs. Let's take a stand now. Let's go. Everybody that believes in justice, take a stand. Don't sit on your asses anymore. Move up there and take a stand.
If you whites can sit back and have people like O'Brien run you to hell crazy, that's your privilege.
All right, so first things first. One of the things that I want to address when it comes to Quebec and when it comes to Canada, sorry for the word that you see on the screen. In 1969, this is 1969, this is a newspaper. And this is another part of the presentation that I want to mention. When it comes to Black identity, the news, the media has a very, very, very big part in shaping the ideas that people have. The media has a very big way of shaping the ideas of immigrant people, of everyone. If you look at that article, this is the thing that marks me the most. Not the word that you see here, but if you go down a little bit and you see the text here, it says, the Negro students of Sir George Williams University are not endearing themselves to the Montreal public at large. They could have chose to choose another word, but they decided to use that word in the media. There's been a lot of different talk at different universities, specifically, I believe a university in Quebec City, over using the French equivalent to this word and saying that that word is harmless. Just to tell you just how much problems we have in Quebec when it comes to the Black community, the Arabic community, just different communities as a whole. There's a lot of issues in this province, and these become roadblocks for people like yourselves that would like to care for people from the Black community, but there are a lot of the times, quite too often, this sense of, I don't want to work with these people because they do not see me. And a lot of practitioners are not really aware of just how much we have issues here in Quebec. So I'm going to continue the video.
We as students feel that we have a right to be heard.
Far back as 10 months ago, the Black students had laid some charges of racism against a Sir George Williams professor.
I suppose in my heart, I figured we'd occupy it and 2 days later it'd all be resolved and everybody would be happy and we'd be singing Kumbaya. Not exactly what happened.
It was so fast.
It was one of the very first times in my life that I was actually afraid for my life.
We were tricked. It was not a victory. People were yelling, burn.
So if you have some time on your own time, you can look up the 9th floor and you'll get more information on that. So what happens to these students is ultimately some of them are arrested, some of them are deported, but amongst those great students, we have one of them by the name of Rosie Douglas. He got deported to the island of Dominica. He ended up becoming the Prime Minister of Dominica. We have another woman who became the very first Black senator of Canada. So we have a lot of brilliant students, but their trajectories when it comes to their education were altered and really had a very big impact on their lives. I want to take you a bit farther now. I want to take you to the 1970s, just so you can get an idea. So far, we looked into the medical system. we looked into the academic system, and I want to take you now to another system that doesn't have the best reputation. If you've guessed right, I'm talking about the police. I want to take you to 1974. 1974, we have a gentleman by the name of Edouard Anglade. Edouard Anglade is the very first Black police officer here in Quebec. 1974, some of you were born in the 70s. I was born in the 80s, and some of you quite some time before that. So we know 1970s are not too far away. So this is something that I want to take into mind. For 3 years, Anglade worked as an undercover agent in the fight against drug trafficking. This undercover work led to numerous arrests, including that of a police sergeant who had colluded with drug traffickers. I'm quite sure by now you've all heard about the very tragic news that happened in Longueuil with the young gentleman by the name of Noran, right? I'm quite sure you guys all heard about that. I'm quite sure you guys heard about the Bureau d'Enquête, the Bureau d'Enquête. I can't remember what that I stands for, but long story short, they've had
Bureau d'enquête indépendante.
Yeah, independent. That organization has had more than 400 plus investigations, and they've never had one person convicted of anything. So the public doesn't really have too much confidence. But let's go back to 1974. Right now it's 2025. It's been quite some time. Have we had much change? What happened to Eddie Anglade, the very first Black police officer in Quebec? We're talking about 1974, right? Well, a couple years later, after Detective Sergeant Anglade was dealing with so much racism, he actually sued the SPVM because it became almost impossible for him to work. So he's one of the very first person in Canada to actually sue a government agency like the police force and actually win. He went on to continue to be a police officer, even though he was in the middle of his career. So if this was the climate for a police officer in the police force, imagine what the climate was for young men and women outside. I don't want you to imagine because I actually have facts, and I want you to pay attention to this document that you see here. This is one of the very first newspaper articles that have really affected the image of young Black youth, especially in Montreal North. So to translate for my friends, long story short, in the 1980s, there was a very big wave of Haitians that came to Quebec because of political issues in Haiti. So the newspaper article says in bold, adolescents terrorizing the north of the city. If you look at the other side here, the adolescents between the ages of 13 to 17 are suspected of being involved in criminal activities of all kinds for several years with the aid of certain adults, and are all part of a great investigation in the last couple of months. And this is from the anti-gang squad of the SPVM. Now, I want to make mention a couple of things. They arrested 150 kids between the ages of 13 and 17. This article came out in 1986. They arrested 150 youth, all suspected of being involved in gangs. Can I tell you what was the conclusion of the investigation? I'll share that with you now. So this was the conclusion of the investigation. If you look at what is in bold and what is highlighted in red, it's mentioned equally that the conclusions of the investigation reject formally the idea that Montreal had different gangs that existed. But according to the Lieutenant Detective Claude Girard, it was nothing more than a bunch of kids that would meet together in the park having sporting activities, and a couple of them would actually get involved into criminal investigations. I have a quick question for you. It's it's 2025. You see an article like that come out. You so happen to have a son or a daughter that's, I don't know, 15 years old. Would you allow them to go play outside with these kids? It's 1986. This article comes out. You're an employer and you're looking for someone to fill in a summer job position. Young Black person comes in. Would you be would you be open to the idea of having these young men work at your establishment? It's 1986. This article comes out and you have an apartment that you're trying to rent. Would you be very open to renting this apartment to this young Black person? Probably not. Probably not. And this is another impact that we have in the Black community when it comes to the media. All right, I want to take you somewhere else. This happened not in 2008, this happened in 2024, where we have some firefighters that felt like they were dealing with racism. So I want to take you to this article. This is Alberto Sion, who has been with the Service Incendie Montréal for quite some time. He basically says, and I'm quoting here, one of the superior officers that were in charge of his training said that he was a good Black person because he was not angry whenever there were racist comments that were being said. However, there was a situation that really, really made Alberto very uncomfortable and sorry. This was published on the 31st of October, 2023, so almost 2 years ago. One day, while he was responding to a medical crisis, there was a shooting. Monsieur Sillon a déclaré, he said that his lieutenant and a police officer were joking around and said if he was being researched by the police because he has dreads, he's Black, and if he knew the person that got shot. So this is someone that's giving medical care to someone that is possibly going to lose their life. And while he's doing that, they ask him, do you know, are you known to the police? Like, are we looking for you? And do you know the victim? That's a situation that happened very recently. I want to take you somewhere else, and I'd actually like your participation in this next thing. And then we're going to go into cultural safety. I want you to look at the image on your screen, and I'd like you to give me a title based off what it is that you see. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and I want you to come up with a title for me. So about 15 more seconds. And really pay attention to the picture. All right, so can anybody tell me when you see this picture, how would you, title this picture that you see on your screen? Yes, please.
Yeah, I would say a lineup of people in front of a church or waiting to attend the church reunion.
All right, perfect. Anybody else? Yes, Dries.
Yeah, church connect group. In my church, we call it like connect groups when people get together like that, and I see the cross there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
I would suspect that if it's the media, they would not just say youth or men or lineup. They may actually say, well, these are Black men. I think if it's in the media.
Okay. All right. Let's see how our friends at the Journal de Montréal use this picture. All right. So first things first. This is another reality when it comes to the Black community, especially with the men that I work with. So I want to take you to, I believe it was 2020, 2021. I don't know if you guys are familiar with PCU, which was basically a program with the government to help people that lost a job because of COVID. So they got funding. That's what PCU is. So the Journal of Montreal came out with this article that says, Les gangs de rue, gang members are profiting from PCU. You guys with me? This is what's wrong with the picture. If you look on the bottom, it says, gang members a couple days ago in the city. When this picture started to circulate all over social media, the children that were in this photo realized that, hey, this is me, and I've never been part of a gang. I was literally in front of a church on a bus stop waiting for myself to go home. I have a backpack on, and they labeled me a gang member. Right now, the Journal de Montréal is actually being sued by the youth that are in this picture. So again, this is one of the issues that we have when it comes to the media. This is an issue that we have when it comes to different systems, right? And I want to take you somewhere else. I know we don't have a lot of time. I had a little activity for you, but I'm going to go right into cultural safety. Has anybody ever took the time to look into cultural security or cultural safety? So if not, we're going to be talking about that today. And this is where I'll end, and I'll let you all have questions or comments, insults, whatever you'd like. So first and foremost, like when it comes to cultural safety or security, it's a question of having a different approach and practice when it comes to policy and when it comes to actual practice. Hold on one second. I don't know what just happened here. Okay, perfect. We're going to move forward. So there's 5 aspects of cultural safety. There's cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, cultural humility, cultural competence, and culturally appropriate services. It's a lot of stuff to take in, but I want to break this down in a very, very practical way. So when it comes to cultural awareness, it's just a question of being aware that there's other cultures that exist. People can do things in a different way, especially if you are supposed to be working with different cultures. I feel like it's our duty to be more informed on how those cultures operate when it comes to certain aspects, right? Because there's the same way there's different theories that we have in different forms of medicine, there's also different cultures in the way that they'll receive those theories. How do we approach these different cultures in a way that makes sense? I want to use something that's very banal, something that's very silly, that is actually a fact, something that we had to deal with in the prison system. I'm going to pull up this example to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. Okay, let me pull this up. So there is an organization which is called the Bureau, not the Bureau de l'Enquête, but the Office of the Correctional Investigator. So the Office of the Correctional Investigator was getting complaints in the prison because this right here, which is basically called a do-rag, was being prohibited for men to use in prison. They were saying that this is pretty much a gang, it's gang affiliated. If there's a color to it, like they just came up with all of these ideas about this. I don't know if you watch hockey, but just the other day, there was a hockey player that wore a do-rag, and the NHL went off into a big frenzy because he was one of the very first people to wear a do-rag. Do-rags have been around since the 1960s. And the purpose of a do-rag, and this is where these aspects come into play, and I'm going to show you them here one more time. So number one, if I use that as an example and we look into cultural safety or security, number one, there was a lack of awareness, C'est-à-dire, they were not even aware of what this thing was. They just shot it down and they put it into a box, and they felt like, you know what, this is something that is gang related. the office of the correctional investigator had to actually step in and to let them know that it is not lawful for them to just prohibit people access to things that are related in regards to culture. When it comes to sensitivity now, which is different from being aware, it's about understanding and respecting diverse perspectives and values. There's a lot of government, institutions. There's a lot of different bodies that are not necessarily sensitive to culture. Like when we look at what happened not too long ago, we had an issue here in Quebec where they were saying that women can't wear hijabs. There's no cultural sensitivity there, right? And then when it comes to cultural humility, it's about recognizing the limitations of cultural knowledge. And too often there is a lack of cultural humility, and thinking and assuming that we know it all based off stereotypes, implicit bias. We may have this idea that we know everything about a group of people, right? Cultural competence. This is about understanding a person's cultural background, communicating appropriately, and trying to tailor your services in that way. I'm not saying that as a practitioner in whatever practice that you practice, that you're responsible to be aware of every single culture that you deal with. That's not what I'm saying, but at least have the cultural humility, at least have a sense of cultural sensitivity, and where you can become more and more competent in serving those populations. Something else that I want to mention before I open up the door for questions, comments, in regards to Black people in the prison system. The people that have the lowest rate of recidivism in federal prisons are Black inmates that are men. The majority of them are men. And something else to take into mind, although they have the lowest rate of recidivism, it is 20 to 24% more difficult for them to get released on parole when compared to their white counterparts that have the same type of crimes. This is true for Black men as well as men that are indigenous, And another major issue that we have when it comes to the prison system is a lot of their actions, the way they communicate, the way they dress, a lot of it is looked through the lens of gang affiliation. There's something in French called GMS. In English, we basically call it the gang affiliation. When you get labeled as someone that's gang affiliated, you're not able to go to prisons where you can actually advance. It's more difficult for you to get education. There's less programs that are being offered. I've had so many clients of mine that we work together and they're telling me that they can't necessarily move forward and progress in their reintegration or rehabilitation because they've been labeled a gang member because of a picture. For example, we had some volunteers come into a prison and everyone did something like this, which is something to do with the Jamaican Rastafarianism. There was nothing there that was related to a gang. These people got labeled and ticketed as gang members, which makes it such that when they get released, they have to go to a different halfway house. They can't go to a normal halfway house. So all of these things, they really weigh down on the Black population, especially men, as they're transitioning through the prison system. So I know I said a lot, but I definitely wanted to go back into history because I feel like it's very, very important for us to realize that we have a lot of issues here in Quebec, from the situation that just happened with Noran to what happened to Freddie Villanueva maybe a decade ago. Very similar situation. I want to take you one last place, and I feel like this is very important before we go. I want to take you there. Hold on one second. Because I feel like it's very important to this conversation. So I know that the majority of you are not familiar with the name Anthony Griffin. Have you heard of the name Anthony Griffin? So Anthony Griffin was the very first person that was killed by police here in Montreal. What was that situation over? $22. $22. So Anthony Griffin, he made the mistake of not paying his taxi fare. After not paying his taxi fare, the police were called. I'm going to show you the information in French and so you can see for yourself. The police were called, and after the police were called, they arrested Anthony Griffin. And this is where common sense comes into play. They arrested him. Whenever we arrest someone, what do we have to do? Can anyone tell me?
You have to tell them their rights,
Yep. What else?
why they are arrested.
Yeah. Apart from that, what is something that they physically do every time when they arrest you?
Handcuffs.
Handcuff.
Yeah. And before they put the handcuffs, what do they do?
You may have to subdue people.
Yeah. But they search you.
Oh,
They search you to ensure that you do not have anything that could harm them, hurt them. So this man was actually arrested, taken to the police station. He ran away. And when he ran away, he was shot in the head. This was the very first person that got arrested from the police. And let me take you 1 second. Let me take you there. Very first person. And this is the crazy part. The crazy part is not even that he got shot in the head and that this person went right back to their job a couple weeks later and just moved to another police station. When we look at the profile of the police officer in question, this is actually the officer. The officer in question was already fined for being aggressive to another Black individual just a couple years later. I don't know why it's going from one to the next. Hold on 1 second. One moment. Yeah, he was arrested just a couple weeks, a couple years before he was charged with aggressive force. And we have I have so much information that I can share with you about different situations, but in Quebec, we've never had someone arrested for what happened. So long story short, that same police officer that shot him in the head in 1983, Alan Gossett, he was charged with excessive force for another gentleman by the name of Daniel Ocher. And while he was doing this, he called him a Modi N-word. He was charged with $2,000 that he needed to pay. And this is the situation now when we look at Anthony Griffin. Anthony Griffin, in his case, what's crazy is the police officer says that he shot that shot by accident, that his gun malfunctioned. Now, I'm in the military as well. I've been in the military for about 8 years now, and we use guns. And the gun that was used back in those days was a revolver. A revolver is kind of like, you know, those cowboy-looking guns? It takes a lot of pressure for you to pull that trigger. You just can't, and the gun goes off. That person was never charged. And we have plenty of people in Quebec that never get charged with some of those situations. Most recently, we had that situation in Longueuil, again, with a young Black boy that was walking in somebody's yard and somebody put boiling hot water on this kid. And that person was charged to go to court, wasn't necessarily in police custody until the Black community came together and they started to protest. You know, so there's a lot of different issues in this province. I'm going to leave the space for questions, comments. I'm a little bit passionate about history, so sorry for keep going on. But if anyone had any questions or comments, I'm really happy to answer.
It's perfect, Svens. Thank you so much for giving us the historical context of systemic racism in Quebec and in Canada. And I think it's very important for all clinicians to know about it, like you say, so we can, if we don't know that, we can't build trust or equity in the mental health we deliver to members of Black communities. So this is very, very important. So I don't know, we do have about 5 minutes or so for questions. If anyone, I think Nicholas had something here. Hold on. Can you please tell us the name of the documentary on Concordia?
Yep, and that's the answer, the ninth floor. And
The
also
ninth
to
floor.
mention,
You
you
got
can
it.
watch the full documentary on YouTube.
on YouTube. A
Yeah.
National Film Board. It's a National Film Board film, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Dries?
Yes, Sven, thank you for your presentation. I feel like it was quite interesting. Um, it's nice that you went back in time for us to get to know like the story here. And that's something that I really appreciate because sometimes people think racism is more in the States, like here there hasn't been that much and stuff. So it's nice that you get us more in tune with what happened here. And my question is, because I wasn't there in the beginning, like I don't know in what field are you working in? Maybe I missed your presentation. I just want to know a bit more about that.
Okay, so I work with federal prisons across Quebec. I also work with the parole board as a consultant, and I work with schools. And so pretty much I help Black men that are reintegrating into society. And I also facilitate for Correctional Services Canada when it comes to different forms of content, even training as well. I've trained all the parole officers in Quebec. So that's pretty much my alley right now.
Perfect. Nice. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. All right, it's looking like Silence Boulevard, the Boulevard of Silence right now. So any question, comments, takeaways?
One of the things I noticed, Spence, is that came up again and again in your talk, is that Black men, Black people in general, I think Black men more specifically, they tend, small things, small incidents tend to get blown up into larger problems more often. I think that's kind of how the pathway goes, you know. So that's important for us to remember as clinicians because we can sometimes head off those problems from escalating. That's what we do in mental health. We can try to keep it down, you know. Don't let things get out of control, and we can help to keep things more in check. That's going to be an important thing. And Hanifa has a question.
Not a question necessarily, but that was a really interesting seminar. And I think I really appreciated that you highlighted the news aspect and how the news and media cover such issues and how they talk about minorities in general is very harmful and does like contribute to like fear mongering and also the history of it, which is important because I think a lot of times people don't realize like, or people might question that, oh, like especially like when it comes to like microaggressions, I think like what I've commonly heard is that maybe Canadian racism comes more in the form of like microaggressions and like there's the facade of being very polite, but I think racism comes through more in like microaggressions here from some of the comparisons between racism in the US versus racism here. Not to say that there's no microaggressions in the US, but that it is more common in the Canadian context. And I think people don't realize that that's still very much present, or like there's this idea that it's not that deep, but I guess it is that deep and that it is very common and people do endorse these stereotypes and biases. And it's just so built into the way that we interact and the kind of, it's just so, I guess, like subconscious in a way for a lot of people that they don't realize that they are endorsing these biases, these stereotypes and assumptions about minorities, Black minorities, Arabs, people from different racialized backgrounds. And I think last year there was a seminar that was also online by somebody in CAMH, from CAMH, and they highlighted that oftentimes, especially young tall Black men are directed into the juvenile system more often than they are sent to, like, say, health services or mental health care. And they're overly represented. So it's unfortunate that, like, even though we have all this information and, to be more informed, that these are still biases and like issues that we see within the system today, especially for a country like Canada that gets so many immigrants every year, but doesn't know how to serve these immigrants or care for them, and the systems and the institutions that we already have. And yeah, so just wanted to say that I really appreciated it. And I really like that you connected it to other minority groups as well. I think that's very important to connect it to the struggles that even Indigenous men and youth face. It's all kind of connected in that way. So I really like that you highlighted that.
All right, love that. Thank you so much, Anifa. You made me think about so many things, and I think I could keep on going for a long time. One of the things I wanted to mention in regard to that, that is 100% fact. There's an organization that we work with called Hoodstock that is looking to help youth with alternative justice. Because when it comes to alternative justice, apart from juvenile detention, Black youth have the lowest participation rate because judges don't really recommend it, right? Something else that I did not mention here that I want to leave you all with is the following. If you had to go see a doctor and that doctor looked exactly like you, wouldn't you feel more comfortable? Right? You would feel more comfortable, right? You would automatically, you would feel like you're understood because you see someone that looks just like you. When it comes to medical practitioners, it's impossible for everyone to have someone that looks just like them. But just remember that regardless of who you're treating and why, just to have a sense of cultural safety, have that idea of cultural safety, read up on it, and realize that, that person may have gone through so many other people that did not take the patience to actually understand, have that empathy, be not judgmental, not go to conclusions. That's what I would say before we leave today.
Thank you, Sven, so much for your wisdom and for your time with us today. We've learned so much, and we're going to have to end. It's 1 o'clock, but we do have another cultural awareness seminar coming up on October 31st. Professor Jude Marie Sinna will be talking to us. I think there might have been another announcement, Alessandra, or is that for now?
Oh, that's it. Yes, so thank you so much. So it's the beginning of our fall seminar. Thank you, Svens. You really provided, a lived experience and how to really look at the historic context and the practice and the way that we react also with exercises that really are very, very effective. And we would like to be able to know you more and working with your congregation. So we will try to organize that, and it would be really a nice way of collaborating in the future.
All right, looking forward to it, and I hope you all have a blessed day.
Thank you so much, Spence. We'll be in
Bye-bye.
contact. Bye then.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Peace.
Thank you.